Hey everyone, Evan, the blind strength coach here from Caneandablefitness in my kitchen. So today we are going to be talking about another hugely important portion of being healthy. Obviously I talk a lot about exercise when it comes to Caneandablefitness, but we also need to make sure that those of us with visual impairments know how to go about nutrition appropriately as well. This part one of this series is going to be discussing the basics of nutrition and how to go about figuring out your baseline, keeping track of your weight, and then being able to move on to part two, where we're going to discuss some very important, accessible ways to keep track of your calories and make sure that you are making the appropriate decisions for yourself. Okay, so when we think about nutrition, we need to make sure that how many calories we're taking in is equal to how many calories we actually burn. Right? That's our metabolism paired with our activity. That is what's going to allow us to maintain body weight. Now, commonly in the blind community, we tend to be overweight because we have these calorically dense, hyper-processed foods, and we pair that with not being as active. The literature says that physical activity levels in the blind community are critically low. So, if we have a lack of education with a lack of activity, we're tending to be much more overweight. So, we're going to solve the first part of that, and then we have lots of other videos in order to solve the activity portion. So go ahead and check all of our different playlists for things like that. Let's break down nutrition very basically. We need to, again, think about our metabolism. So everyone's going to have that baseline of how much their body tends to burn, and this is called a basal metabolic rate. This is going to be if you are just chilling on the couch all day, staying alive, and your organs are able to operate appropriately, how much your body burns. Then we get to layer on top of that our total daily energy expenditure, because that's going to add in the thermic effect of food, which is how much different foods tend to cost in calories to actually digest. So proteins are going to cost more from a thermic effect. That's where you're going to get really warm, especially if you think about like Thanksgiving dinner, how you tend to have a lot of carbs and a lot of protein, and those tend to make you really, really hot. If you ever get like the night sweats, if you have a big meal before bed or something, carbs are going to be next on that list, and then fats aren't nearly as thermically active. They don't cost as much from a heat perspective to digest. So that's going to add a little bit to your metabolism, generally about 5 or 10%. And we're also going to have our activities of daily living. So this is going to be going out and about, moving around, doing chores throughout the house. Maybe you're a bit more of an active person where you have to walk to work, things like that. That is, of course, going to cost energy. And then we are going to have our exercise energy expenditure. So that is going to be where we're very explicitly working hard and trying to do stuff, whether it be lifting weights, doing cardio, anything like that. That's going to tend to cost more calories than just our regular activities of daily living. So if we take all of that into account and think about how active we are, along with our baseline, then that is going to add up to how many calories we actually burn throughout the day. Now, how in the world are you going to know that without going into a lab and putting on a special mask and having all these different things tested? What we can do is just go online and find a basic BMR, basal metabolic rate calculator, and then you can put in your height, weight, and gender. Preferably find one that's a little bit more in-depth. So there's some out there that will take your activity level into account as well, so you can know a little bit more precisely what your metabolic rate for the day is going to be like. Once you have this baseline, that doesn't mean that's necessarily true for you. It's just going to be, again, those very general calculations that you were able to put in there, and be able to use that as just a starting point. You may burn more, you may burn less. But again, this is our general starting point, maintaining proper activity levels like you told the calculator that you do, as well as maintaining generally the same body weight. As we start losing a lot of body weight, we're not going to have as big of a furnace. But if we have a lot of metabolically inactive tissue, fat doesn't burn nearly as much as muscle, then we weigh more because of that, then that's going to be taken into account as well. So you can see there's a lot of different ways for this to skew, but what we want to do is just start very consistently with an easy starting point. So once you get that metabolic rate, that can be your starting point, and you know whether to go up or down from there. Now, a pound of fat consists of 3,500 calories. We divide that by 7, and we come out with 500 calories. So, if you are trying to lose 1 pound of fat per week, which is very reasonable, then what you want to do is make sure that you are in a 500 calorie deficit every day. Again, that average is then going to come out to burning a pound of fat assuming that you are hitting your calorie goals, making sure that it's 500 calories less than that calculation your baseline came out as, and that's assuming that that baseline is, again, true. But there's no great way to figure out without going into a fancy lab outside of trial and error. So doing your best in order to maintain a 500 calorie deficit every day and maintain the same activity levels and making sure that you are getting in plenty of general moving throughout the day as well. So you're not just having an hour-long workout and otherwise you're being a sloth. That is going to be your great way of determining whether you are in enough of a deficit. Now, how are we going to be able to keep track of our body weight, especially with a visual impairment? So we want to have the same amount of clothes, and we want to make sure that we are doing this at the same time of day. Now, sometimes hydration and everything like that, how much extra water you're holding because of how many carbs you had recently, different things like that, can skew this. But again, we're looking for a general trend to make sure we're heading the right direction, because forward progress is better than no progress or backwards progress. So don't get freaked out if it goes up one day here and there. Instead, we just want to make sure we think about a nice trend sloping down if weight loss is our goal. So again, how are we going to keep track of that? I have a talking scale here. I was able to get off of Amazon. On the bottom, you are able to switch it between pounds and kilograms. So I'm going to step on it so you can hear it talking. It takes a little bit for it to kick in, and it always freaks out sighted people when all of a sudden the scale starts yelling their weight. Maybe they don't want everybody to know. Eventually it'll go. There we go. You can hear it talking. Yeah, it says it twice. So, if I was to, weigh myself every night before I go to bed, just in shorts, then I'm going to have consistent clothing, so that's not being skewed, and then I'm going to be able to track if that trend is going the appropriate way. Now, thinking about gaining muscle, obviously we can't just gain 10 pounds of muscle out of nowhere and do that within 1 week. So again, that rule of about a pound is a great way to start approaching things. So half a pound to a pound of gain. We're going to be carrying a little bit more water and a little bit more carbs inside of our muscles if we are on a weight gain phase, trying to gain muscle and do enough resistance training in order to stimulate our body to actually be willing to gain that muscle. So in order to do that, we need to make sure, again, we're tracking things consistently on the scale as well. In order to do that, 200, 300, sometimes 500 calories in a surplus is what is in order for that. Now, what the heck is a calorie and the macronutrients that make them up? So, there's 3 different main macronutrients. We have protein, carbs, and fats. Protein and carbs are each per gram 4 calories. Okay? So, we have 4 calories for every gram of protein. We have 4 calories for every gram of carb that you take in. Fat is going to be much higher. It is 9 calories per gram. So they're much more calorically dense. So that's why if you have people trying to go a lot more fat dominant, such as in a ketogenic diet, then they're not going to be able to necessarily have the same volume of food, because those fattier foods, hopefully healthy, like eggs, avocados, things like that, aren't going to take up as much space, because per gram of weight, they are going to have over double the amount of calories. So that's how you're going to be able to keep track of your macronutrients. Now, what we want to do is make sure that we're getting enough protein, because that's our building blocks. So a lot of times for weight loss or weight gain, we need to err on the side of having plenty of protein. A lot of people recommend 1 gram per pound of body weight or 1 gram per pound of lean body weight. The lean body weight is going to be a little bit harder to determine. We're going to have to know body fat and everything like that. So being able to skew a little bit on the heavier side can be helpful as well. Again, for muscle gain, that's going to make sure we have enough building blocks in order to produce that muscle and be able to grow it. And then if we are doing weight loss, then we're going to have that extra bit of burning that comes with the thermic effect of food with that protein to make sure that we are getting, again, a little bit better of a buffer. Protein is also very satiating, so that does tend to help a lot with weight loss. Now, when it comes to the balance of carbs and fats, you really have to fit that in with how it works with the total amount of calories that you get, whether you're trying to lose or gain or maintain weight. So, there's a lot of different approaches, and that can be a whole different other series about carb cycling versus ketogenic versus just something well balanced versus paleo, all these different diet strategies. You just have to figure out what works for you. What we have to make sure to do though is not flirt with having absolutely zero carbs all the time, because a lot of times that can really throw off hormones and everything, and we need to make sure that our body is still able to be metabolically flexible and able to use carbs appropriately at the right time. Now, does that mean you deserve carbs all the time? Not necessarily. With fats, those are really helpful for maintaining appropriate hormone levels, but again, they can be really calorically dense. We could accidentally burn them by cooking them way too hot and things like that, so they can oxidize and actually be a little bit more dangerous. So we have to make sure that we're having good, healthy fats in appropriate amounts. Again, it's all about that right balance. So that's going to sum up the general nutrition principles that we need to think about. Again, to wrap up, we have 4 calories per gram of protein, 4 calories per gram of carb, and 9 calories per gram of fat. You need to balance those calories in order to make sure that it fits within however many calories you need to get appropriate to your body weight and your activity levels. Make sure it makes sense and is going to be something that you can do for the long term and not just a quick 1 or 2 week burst, and make sure it fits with your goals, whether it be weight loss, maintaining good body weight, or gaining weight, hopefully in the form of muscle. In part 2, we're going to be going over some of the most accessible tools to use in the kitchen as a person with a visual impairment in order to make sure that things are nice and simple and able to keep you on track.